Hello, hello, hello. Welcome, everyone. I hope I'm coming through well. It's good to see you all. I am excited to be streaming once again. It's been quite a while since I've done one of these. I've been very busy, and it's kind of prevented me from doing a Twitch stream for a little while, so I'm really excited to be back to it. Let's see. I'm gonna ask how my volume is sounding. And yeah, let me go ahead and put a little background music on as well. I think I'll play some Windswept, which is a composer that I really love. So, they have great CC Creative Commons music. So let's do some of that, and I'll try and get the volume good for that so that it's not too loud. And you all can let me know how this is coming through for you all. As I said, I'm on a new desktop, which is exciting for me. It means that all of my OBS setup and stuff, I had to try and recreate it and get it set up well on this new machine. And this is the first time doing a stream from the new machine. So, yeah, we'll see. It's just a different. It's still a touch too loud on the music. Okay. Oh, I'm still. Yeah, I'll just keep nudging it slightly. Maybe I'll reposition my mic a little bit as well. All right. Let's see. Oh, people are asking about the bassinet over here. Yes, I am a fairly new parent. It's been really exciting. Yes. All right. So. Yeah, thank you all. Thank you. It's been really wonderful. Welcome to hell. Yeah, it's a new webcam. I got an Elgato face cam, which is pretty nice. I debated a bunch of different webcam options and ended up deciding to go with this one, and I've liked it so far. Yeah. Yes, Revinu asks, when did you find the time, Winky Face? I feel like there's a joke there where I make fun of myself by saying I didn't need long or something like that. I don't know. Yeah, no, family time has been really important, and I've had plenty of it. I mean, I keep myself really busy with Foundry and family, and that's pretty much all for the time being. But maybe all things in balance, I guess. All right, let's see. People are asking if I have a standing desk. It is a standing desk. I'm sitting right now, though. It's like an adjustable sit stand. Okay, let's see here. I need to zoom this in. Sorry, I'm just getting chat set up in a good way where I can just sort of put it over on this monitor. As I said, this is all this setup is a little bit new, so I'm just kind of taking a moment before we get going to get into that. But thank you all so much for so many of you coming to join today for this developer update Q&A. It's been quite a while since I've done one of these, partly because we've been really heads down on working on some things, and there hasn't been as much reason to stream, because as we've been working on the stable portion of V9, there's just kind of less, I guess, flashy, new, exciting stuff to show. But now we're working on V10, and there's a lot to show. So I think, yeah, it's well past time for a stream. So I'm here today. I'm going to talk a lot about V10 Prototype 1, which is our newest prototype release, highly unstable, but it is the first release that will be available in the new... I'm still getting music sometimes goes higher. Gosh, you guys are so very sensitive to the music. All right, fair enough. I'll dial it down even more. Incredible. All right. Well, now I can't even hear it. I want to hear a little bit of music. I need the mood as well. All right, let's see. Let me put on the AFK screen and see if I can balance this slightly better. Well, no, it's okay. All right, so yeah, anyways, V10, Prototype 1. This is a kind of a highly unstable first release in the V10 sequence. And yeah, it's going to be something that really is intended specifically for developers who are building systems and modules for the Foundry, using the Foundry API. Of course, there are some shiny new and exciting features that I'm looking forward to showing you in V10, but it is really, the purpose of the prototyping phase is for us to do some big, new, and disruptive things, and to give as much time as we possibly can for those to settle out and to kind of have time to stabilize and have time to collect feedback from the community. So really don't recommend anyone to be trying to like use this to run a game. That would be a bad call. However, we would suggest that software developers, system developers in particular, start engaging with us from now onwards through the end of the development process for V10, to engage early and often to provide feedback on the new functionality and how that functionality is impacting and working or potentially not working for your system. So I'm going to talk today about like what are our big high-level goals with V10, where are we in the process, what are we working on next, what have we done. I'm going to show off some shiny new features, and I'm going to talk about some big API changes that will be really relevant for the devs in the audience. So I'll try and focus on sort of user-facing fun features first, so that if I eventually lose your interest or enthusiasm when I get to the API stuff, I'll tackle that sort of towards the second half of the stream. I'm also going to take questions from chat, and yeah, I think probably at first I'm going to do a lot of sort of presenting, and then we'll do some Q&A later after I get a chance to present the changes. So thank you all for, the questions and stuff that you're submitting in chat, but there is a lot to get through and go over. So I do want to kind of spend some time to showcase the new stuff and have time to talk about it before taking a lot of questions. All right, so without further ado, let's jump into talking a little bit about V10 in general and what our goals for the next major version of the software are. So every time we do a new major version of Foundry VTT, we focus on a couple of key areas where we're going to work on improving key features, as well as key infrastructure changes that are needed to reinforce the software and strengthen our foundation. The key user-facing features that we're working on for V10 are an overhaul of the journal system, which we call Journal V2, and this is what was voted on by our Patreon community. It was the winner of the community vote. It's something we're really excited to work on. We have not yet started working on it for Prototype 1. So with Prototype 1, we've focused on the underlying architecture, infrastructure, and some sort of more fundamental changes that we want to make as a precursor for the Journal V2 functionality. We will be working almost exclusively on Journal V2 and our other user-facing feature in Prototype 2, but it was important to do the underlying foundational work first. Okay. Need to boost your voice volumes. Fine for me, music may be a touch too loud. All right, I'm sorry I need to pull this over onto my monitor to try and rebalance this audio. Sorry, I'm going to give you like infinite screen loop of death for a second, but I'm just going to I'm going to dial down the music here a lot. My mic is as loud as it can go, so I'm just going to dial down the music here a lot, and then I'm going to change it here where it's a little louder for me. And then hopefully those of you thinking that the music / voice volume is too loud, you can just turn your speakers up a little bit and compensate. That should get you a louder voice volume from me. Sorry about the, audio balancing stuff. As I said, it's the first time using this PC, so all of my OBS settings I have had to get kind of reset a little bit. Okay, so as I mentioned, the two major features for V10. One, Journal V2, we're going to be focusing on it heavily in Prototype 2. The other thing we're going to be focusing on, oh my gosh, wow, Versace Hovercraft, thank you so much. That is amazing generosity, sir. For those of you who don't know, Versace Hovercraft is the operator of one of our partnered hosting service providers, Molten Hosting, really amazing service that they offer to get your Foundry games hosted in a turnkey environment that just gives you a kind of great experience where it, just works. And so definitely check out Molten Hosting. And Versace, thank you so much for that generosity. That's awesome. As I was saying, Journal V2, the other major user-facing feature that we're focusing on in V10 is vision modes. So currently, when you have, vision from the perspective of a token, there is some powerful functionality associated with that, but it's sort of currently strictly related to like angle and distance of vision. We're going to be adding in V10 a whole set of vision configuration modes, much like for a light source where there's advanced options and different sort of animations. I don't know if we'll do animations or not, but different sort of configurations for the technique that's used to display how the vision mode looks. Just as we can do that for light sources, we're going to be bringing that type of approach to vision with a whole host of associated advanced settings. So that's another thing that I don't have to show for you today. But those two features, vision modes and Journal V2, are what's going to be our focus in Prototype 2. So as we progress further along the tracks for V10 in general, you'll be seeing a lot more of journal improvements and of vision modes. So what I am going to talk about is what we've done in Prototype 1, which is a lot of work to strengthen and lay the foundation underneath these improvements that we want to make. That doesn't mean that this is all like boring architecture, but it does mean that a lot of the stuff we focused on with this particular iteration, this particular prototype, is more of that nature. So there's a lot of breaking changes, and that may initially sort of scare you, and understandably so. However, most of these are changes that there is a graceful migration path for. And we tried really hard to get as many bordering on all of our breaking changes in the API done upfront in Prototype 1. So there may still be a few other breaking changes coming in Prototype 2 when we discover that we need to, change some aspects of the journal data model in order to support Journal V2. But beyond things that are strictly necessary for vision modes and for Journal V2, I really think we've managed to kind of front load all of our breaking changes into Prototype 1, and that's done to maximize the amount of time that developers have with them for the purpose of providing feedback, and then also for helping us figure out if there's other things that we can do to make these changes in a better way, or in a way that provides better compatibility. Okay, so I do want to really get into these, but I don't want to start here because I don't want to lose the interest of all of the amazing folks that are tuning in to see some of the new features that we've developed. So I'm going to come back to breaking API changes, and I'm going to address that a little bit later. I'm going to start actually by talking about the new features section, which is a bunch of new features that we have actually managed to implement in prototype 1. So I need my, let's see, I need my IDE over here, not this project. I need the main Foundry project. I've got some cool stuff to show you all. Let's see. All right. So let's get started talking about new features. The way we have this organized: architecture and infrastructure, documents and data, instance, interface, applications, game canvas. If I were to try and showcase the shiniest stuff first, I probably wouldn't go in linear order, but I am going to, because I think it just will make it easier for me to, to walk through the changes. I really wish I could zoom in my IDE. I could swear there's a way to zoom the whole IDE here, but I think that got taken away somehow in a WebStorm update, and now all I have is basically presentation mode, which is not actually what I want, because it doesn't have my... Yeah, this is kind of frustrating. I really want to just show this, but not with presentation mode. I want to just zoom everything in a little bit for you all who are watching, but I'm not sure how to actually do that. Control plus key is not working for me. Yeah, that control plus or control mouse wheel is not actually working. So, all right, someone's giving me tips. Control Alt S, IDE settings, editor, general select change. Let's see, editor, general. Change font size with... brilliant. Okay, there's a setting for it. Okay, perfect. Thank you very much. That is excellent. That's what I was looking for. Thank you, Flavian Gascard, for that JetBrains knowledge assist. Much appreciated. That's what I was looking for. Okay, let's get into it. So, new features, architecture and infrastructure. This is one that's pretty exciting. A couple of these features, there's a common theme, and I'll mention them as I get to them. We do this thing on our team that is called sort of Free Project Friday. The last Friday of every month, of which this Friday will actually be one of those, we allow the team, everyone on the team can kind of ignore our normal prioritization, and we instead all choose something to work on that we individually think is cool or care about. And that allows us to set aside the things that we sort of must do in favor of trying to do some things that we're excited about or interested in doing. And so sometimes there's projects that come out of one of these Free Project Fridays that actually is a really cool addition to the software that makes it into core. And there's a couple of those that made it into V10, so I'm excited to show you those. This is one of them. So we've wanted to work on improving the performance of the software by taking advantage of web workers. Web workers are a way to bring multi-threading into the JavaScript environment. So by default, JavaScript is single-threaded, but there is an API for web workers which can allow you to dispatch work to alternative work threads. And it's a pretty good API, actually, at a low level. But it has a couple of key limitations. The first is that when you initialize a worker, it has to be preloaded with a set of JavaScript code that is able to be run on the worker. The second that is a key limitation of it is that it doesn't have built-in control for asynchronous flow of tasks. So if you wanted to delegate a task to the worker and then do something in the main thread once the worker has finished its work, there isn't built-in support for that kind of asynchronous delegation of work to the web worker. So we ended up with a entirely new API, which I'm really excited about. I think it's really great. It involves two classes, one of which is an async worker, and one of which is a worker manager. And between the two of them, the worker manager and the async worker, there's support for registering web workers, there's support for delegating tasks to the web worker, and there's also support for pushing onto the web worker a set of JavaScript functions that you want the worker to be able to run. And so this is really important, I think, for module developers to be able to use these workers effectively, where you're able to like actually deploy executable code onto the web worker, which you can then request the web worker to do. So if you look at the GitLab issue for this particular, it's issue 6759 in our GitLab, there is some example usage that I can show in terms of like, you can create a new worker thread, you can load an executable function from your main thread onto that worker, and you can request that that worker perform a certain function in a way that allows you to await the result of it asynchronously. So it's a really neat API that has some real key advantages. In terms of like benchmarking, we've already done some internal testing of some aspects of, say, like wall polygon computation, wall intersection computation. Some of these things actually can be, you can unlock performance gains by dispatching them to a worker thread. And we're really excited to delve more into that as we continue through V10. So yeah, this is something that I'm really excited about as a new API. And I think is something that, I think that some of our devs will really kind of create some amazing stuff. Some of you are already using web workers, but this provides an option for doing that in kind of a core, reusable and manageable way with some of these nice additional attributes. All right, moving on. One thing we improved with audio buffering is that when audio is loaded inside Foundry, currently those buffers are kept in memory, and previously there was no sort of maximum cache size. So as further audio was loaded into memory, the size of the memory, footprint that was being used by those audio buffers would continue to increase. Not exactly a memory leak in the sense that like it wasn't references to stuff that we didn't intend to save. Like we intended to save those references, so not really a memory leak so much as just like not as efficient as it could be. And so now we have a maximum cache size for the audio buffers cache, as well as we retain metadata for each cached buffer in terms of its recency of access. So over time, once you surpass a threshold of the amount of memory that's used for audio buffer caching, it will expire and release certain buffers from the cache in reverse chronological order of how recently those buffers were accessed. So that's a nice performance improvement that allows us to keep cached buffers in memory close to hand for audio effects that are being frequently used, while releasing some of those buffers over time if they go stale. Caligo asks, is there a benchmarking helper for modules to help them figure out if this will help or hurt them? Yes, absolutely. There is a benchmarking helper which you can use to test the performance of asynchronous code. Once we get to the Q&A section of this stream, if you're interested, ask me about it again, and I can maybe show a demo of how to use that. Some other architecture improvements. We added some new low-level helpers to. So as some of you know, we kind of extend some of the JavaScript primitives by adding some more functionality to them than what is provided by base.js. We added in this update a bunch of helpers for working with sets, and in particular sort of iterating over elements of sets, unioning, intersecting, concatenating, filtering, finding, mapping, reducing, stuff like that. Sort of many of the sort of array-like functionalities that could also be used when you're working with sets. So that's kind of helpful. And then we improved some of those array-like helpers that on the collection, which is a subtype of map. So those are nice sort of low-level improvements. All right, let's get into some of the exciting stuff. New features on the server side with regards to server-side document modification and loading. I'm going to kind of skim over this first one because I'll talk about it in the API changes, but we made document validation a lot more performant, where previously when you save a change to a document, like in this scene when I move my token from A to B, the server was sort of revalidating the entirety of the scene document in order to validate that that like entire block of data was good before writing it to the database. This was like maximally protective, but not super efficient. So now there's a lot more targeted field-specific validation of just what was changed. So like if I move my token, the only thing that's changed is the X and Y coordinates for one particular token. So all we need to revalidate is just those specific changed fields, and that makes the server-side responsiveness of database changes a lot better. Another thing that was a key problem in V9 and before is that if for whatever reason you have source data for a document that is invalid, maybe you just have a legacy world where there's like a certain actor that has like bogus data in it and Foundry can't load that actor properly because the source data is invalid. Historically, it's been kind of impossible to cure that problem because that invalid data is not available to you to access and correct. And that was partly because you couldn't access the invalid document, and it was also partly because if you tried to update an invalid document, it would fail on the server side when, loading that document because it's invalid. So it was kind of like a serpent eating its own tail that left you stuck in this state that like if you had bad data, there was no way to fix it. So now the framework is much better where documents can be constructed strictly or non-strictly. Strict is default, where if you construct a new document instance, all of the data that you pass into that document must be valid or the construction fails. And that's kind of the old, usually what you want and default behavior, but you can construct a document non-strictly where if you have some invalid data in what you pass in, it will still make a best attempt to construct the document if possible, even in the presence of invalid data. And so that's what's used when you're, say, making an update to an existing document in the database. The server's now able to construct that document non-strictly. So even if the data is previously invalid, you can now fix it by passing valid data to an update function, and you can correct for the problem that you had. So that's all a little bit technical, but it was like a key piece of our infrastructure that was really not ideal. And so this is like the type of reinforcement that the Foundry software desperately needs as we're doing these new updates in order to be as good as it can possibly be. I'm going to talk a lot about data models later, so I'm going to skip over this one, but I will remember to come back to it. Some other user-facing features that are fun is newly created scene thumbnail images are now saved as WebPs instead of PNGs, so that's nice. Just smaller images saved to disk. Your pre-existing thumbnails will remain as PNG, but if the thumbnail's resaved, then it would be converted to WebP at that time. All right, so we improved methods related to how active effect changes are applied to an actor, and that allows them to more accurately and reliably adapt to a variety of target data types. So previously there were like some cases where like if your target data was like Boolean or some like an array of strings or something, like maybe your active effect would apply to that data in a sort of unpredictable way. So that's a nice change. We're getting to some of the fun stuff, I promise. Fog exploration data now supports flags, where previously you couldn't have flags for a fog exploration document. But now you can. Lastly, in this section, to allow for users who have permission over a token to access the allowed set of wildcard token images that can be chosen for that actor, there's a new API workflow called actor get token images, which goes through a separate server workflow to provide an array of available tokens, available images for the token, even if the user doesn't otherwise have access to browse the file browser. That's a bit dense. That's a little bit difficult to parse. Let me try to clarify that again. So suppose I have a token, and that token is configured such that it uses a wildcard token path, and I'll say like, I'm okay with this acolyte being, any humanoid token at all. So when we create this acolyte, I just happen to get a kobold, but we could, in order to know which token image can be used for the actor, the client has to be able to discover what are all of the humanoid tokens that are available. And so there's a new workflow for doing that, which doesn't end up in a place where a player doesn't normally have permission to discover that, but they need to for this particular use case. So it's quite a specialized sort of corner case, but it is an important one for us to have addressed. Which means that you can have, some people use wildcards for things like your character might have like different faces, like different appearances of your same character. And you want your players to be able to choose like which look their token uses without necessarily giving that player access to the normal file browser. So there's some good stuff you can do with that now, where previously you'd be sort of stuck on a permissions problem. All right, moving along. We added a new framework for displaying HTML tooltips that has been implemented with a supporting underlying API. So the way these tooltips work is it supports localization, it supports intelligently and dynamically positioning the tooltip relative to a referenced element. And tooltips can be generated either programmatically from within JavaScript, or they can be designated during HTML template rendering. There's example usages in the GitLab issue. I'll show you how it looks on screen, and when you can see, for example, when I hover over the scene controls, like token controls, measurement controls, tile controls, select targets, all of these buttons have tooltips that will position themselves, and they have like a nice sort of fade in animation. They're kind of, I think they feel pretty smooth. They look nice, and they always are positioned so that they're over top of other elements. They're always positioned so that they're on screen. They never sort of flow off the screen. Works for macros in the hotbar as well. All kinds of different buttons support these tooltips now. Also works for the sidebar tabs. So for example, like combat encounters, scenes, and you'll notice like the tooltips displayed below the sidebar tab, but as I get over towards where it would kind of collide with the edge of the screen, the tooltip always stays on screen. So it's aware of like the boundaries where it can appear. And if the sidebar is minimized, the tooltips start like appearing to the left instead of below. So it's very easy to sort of intelligently place these tooltips in a way that like their positioning will be intuitive and will look nice. And the API for doing that is really simple to use. So not only are we going to be using this a lot to add tooltips to the application to make it easier for players to discover what certain things do, but we think this makes it really easy for module and system developers to also add tooltips using this same framework. So yeah, very excited about that as something that people will be able to take advantage of. Thanks for the subs, folks. Those of you subbing with Prime, we really appreciate it. It helps us out and it shows support, and it's really generous, and it's much appreciated. All right, so yeah, excited about tooltips. In terms of the API, the GitLab issue shows quite good examples of how to do that. It's very simple. Either you can programmatically display a tooltip, or you can register as part of your HTML markup that certain elements should have tooltips. So yeah, great stuff there that's really useful. Another thing that's really exciting is we've added a new API framework for providing guided tours, which are implemented using a new underlying tour API. Tours take in a configuration of the steps of the tour and the metadata associated with each step. And those tours will allow you to walk the user through a set of sort of introductory or tutorial steps. So in the GitLab issue, this is another one that came out of our free project Friday, where Cody was working on tours, and Cody came up with this one. So it's very cool. I'm gonna actually see if I can show what this, like, here's an example tour. We'll see if Cody's example documentation works as advertised. All right, so I've got some tour data where I've defined some steps with selectors and titles and content and whatnot. And then I can construct a tour element, a new tour from my tour data. And then I will, let me drag this over here. I will just try and start the tour with tour.start. Hey, there we go. So now over in the Foundry interface, like, the UI has been kind of faded out, and it's like I can't interact with the canvas at this point. But I do have this tour pop-up where, I've got like a title, some content of the tour. I can close the tour, I can bail out of it, or I can move to the next step. And as I step through the tour, it can like highlight different parts of the UI and tell me about them. This is just kind of jumping around a little bit, but yeah, it can highlight different things and point out how to use the software a little bit better. We don't have a working like new user tutorial tour yet, but here I can complete the tour. And there's the underlying API will remember that you've finished a certain tour. So each tour can be registered with certain metadata. There'll eventually be the ability to keep track of like which tutorials or tours you've done. You can redo one, but it'll remember which one you've done or remember like partial progress through them. And so this provides a framework for us to provide better like tutorials. I see questions about HTML styling, both related to tours and related to tooltips, and the answer is yes, both with the tooltips API, which the tour actually uses. So like these tour steps are actually like more customized versions of tooltips. So the tour API uses the tooltips API, and both the tour API and the tooltips API can support like custom HTML and custom styling inside the rendered box. Exciting stuff that we are working on there as ways to improve new user experience. And the addition of the Tour API was another really exciting thing that came out of our free project Friday sort of brainstorming process. Hopefully by the time that V10 launches, we'll actually have like at least a sort of basic tutorial tour for new users that they can do when they first install Foundry VTT. So by the time V10 gets to stable, we'll hopefully have our own sort of official, so you're new to Foundry tour. But we'll see. Florian asks a good question about how you can perform sort of before or after step functions for tours. And it's actually pretty easy to do that because the design of the API is such that you can subclass the tour class to do like a specialized tour for your system. And built into the abstraction of the tour class is certain sort of pre and post steps. So there's like a pre-step and there's a post step where you can like perform certain setup or teardown steps before a certain tour step is done. So say like when you're moving from tour step 2 to tour step 3, in your pre-step for step 3, you can like open a certain character sheet so that your step 3 can like highlight a part of the character sheet. So yeah, you definitely have opportunities before and after each step to like manipulate what's displayed on screen so that you can then guide people to it as part of the tour. All right, moving on. So I mentioned that tooltips have been added to the sidebar, scene controls, macro hotbar, whatnot. We also created this is just a little thing, but a tooltip for the scene configuration thing. So each scene can have like a true name as well as a sort of non-spoilery navigation name. So like an unassuming camp. Suppose this is like displayed to players as an unassuming camp, but you as the GM need to keep track of like what the true scene name is. So now hovering over a scene that has a different navigation name versus its true name will show you the true name on tooltip. That's for GM only. We clarified and made more consistent the labels of the sidebar tabs to, instead of making them a little bit more complex like scene directory or actors directory, they're now just more straightforward. They're just the pluralized names of the document type that each sidebar tab contains. So, you know, combat encounters, scenes, actors, items. It's a little bit more terse and it's a little bit less confusing about like what is a directory, like this is just where your items are, so a little bit more straightforward and to the point. Another thing that I can show is that we made some changes on the setup screen. So your worlds are now sorted alphabetically by title, and the configuration form of the setup screen now uses an underlying a new underlying data model to validate and to handle persistence of the data. So just kind of some fun, not so much fun, but necessary underlying foundational improvements there. All right, let's move on to some of the shiny stuff. I know everyone's always most excited about canvas improvements, and for good reason, because that's where the immersiveness and the functionality of Foundry VTT is really most apparent. We have a very exciting bonus feature in V10 that we hadn't expected to do, but it came out once again, out of our free project Friday. So a long press will generate a ping notification and oh, interesting. I think I've discovered a bug with pings. Let me see if it fixes it when I refresh. Prototype 1, folks, Prototype 1. First bug of Prototype 1 on stream. Okay, yeah, interesting. So what was happening just then is like it was pinging in the same location no matter where I actually clicked. So there's a bug we need to fix somewhere. But as you can see, a long press and hold will ping with this sort of pulsing ping in your configured color of your user. There are some other variations for pings as well, where an alt press will give sort of a red triangular alert style ping. And for Game Master users, a shift long hold will focus in on a particular area of the map, not just for you, but for all of your players. So if I connect to this game using a player user, we'll see that as I ping on the canvas as the GM, the player sees the ping location or as an alert, so the same style is used. And if I were to say like want to focus the player's attention on this bonfire up here, but the player's kind of looking down here as the GM, I can shift click over here and it will smoothly pan the player's view to the location that I want them to focus in on, and can make it really nice and easy for you as the GM to like highlight certain features of the map that you think the players should take note of. Yeah, so really great stuff here. This is Kim's work from Free Project Friday, so really excited that Kim was able to take this on and make this a sort of bonus bonus feature. I see someone saying the canvas animation is so smooth. It is really smooth, and there's a reason for that, which I will be commenting on in a later portion of the update notes. Another really fun thing to highlight is that if a ping happens off screen, so you see here the player's sort of zoomed in and looking at something. Suppose the ping happens off screen. There's a nice arrow, and it's not the ping variety that like drags their view. You see that there's a nice arrow at the outer edge of the player's screen that sort of indicates that a ping is happening outside of where they are currently able to see. And so that's a really nice sort of little UI UX touch that makes it easier not to lose track of the fact that someone's trying to get your attention. Yeah, it's a really awesome feature, and Kim did a super great job with it. And I know as a GM, I'm going to absolutely love using the, shift players' attention to something as I'm narrating it. I can, get people to look at the part of the map that I want them to look at, and really great stuff, and one that we've wanted to exist in the core software for a while. Just something that we hadn't been able to prioritize yet, but now we have prioritized it. So yeah, really excited by that one, and I'm sure those of you are excited as well. A question about permissions. I'm trying to remember if we've done this yet, or if we simply kind of talked about it and intend to. I think that currently pinging is tied to the mouse cursor permission. I'll have to follow up with Kim on that, but I do think that what we had discussed internally and what we intend to do, if we haven't done it yet, then it needs to be as a follow-up, is that pinging needs to be a separate permission control versus just the mouse cursor or ruler measurement or things like that. So it looks like we haven't done that just yet with customizing user permission to ping. But by the time we get v10 to stable, I'm confident that we will have added a permission control so that you can choose which players you want to have access to ping. So yeah, that's a good call out. All right, the next one is another that I'm not sure I can really show it off, but I think hopefully you'll get the idea from just me telling you about it. Secret Fire has done some tremendous work continuing off of the work in V9 lighting on improving the performance of lighting shaders. So what previously happens in V9 with the beautiful V9 lighting, it's so beautiful, but one of the disadvantages of V9 lighting is that the way that the light is rendered is we render a full circle for the light, and then we mask that circle using the active polygon region of the light source. So for example, if I'm dragging this light around, you notice that it has like a certain polygon region. What was done in V9 is that we would draw the full circle unrestricted, and then we would mask that circle using the polygon. Now we have the ability to translate that polygon directly into the geometry of the vertex shader for the light source, which means that there's no additional render texture or masking step necessary for the light source. And the region that the light affects is baked directly into the behavior of the shader. And so this is a really nice improvement for performance, which makes lights render faster for almost every type of machine. And not just that, but it also allows us to have better control over drawing like the slightly soft edge where the light translates, where this light is then cast into shadow by the tent. We're able to get like a nice soft edge there due to some tricks that we can do in the vertex shader. I think I've lost my music for a bit. Let's bring that back. Yeah, so this is like a really great performance improvement that will benefit everyone who's using lighting in Foundry VTT, which we hope is basically everyone, because the lighting is just so good. additional lighting stuff that I'm sure you will all love a great deal. Let me pull up a map where I can maybe show this pretty easily. All right, I'm going to get rid of all of my light sources here except one, maybe. Let me turn off this token. All right, we have reworked the torch animation. So what was previously the torch animation is now known as flickering light. And there's a reason for that, which I hope will become clear soon. And we've also slightly recalibrated how the speed and intensity of that animation works. But it's now a little bit more smoothly animated while still having some of that like random erraticness that represents either flame or like a lantern. So flickering light is the new torch, and it's the new torch because there is actually a new torch. Where flickering light is now sort of what's best for any light source where the flame is not directly exposed. So if it's like a covered lantern or a lamp or a neon sign that's kind of flickering erratically. However, we do have what is called a torch now, which is able to configure like an area of sort of exposed flame that is very vibrant and very bright in the center of the animation. It pulses and flickers the same way that flickering light does, but it gives you this really bright central flame that is an authentic way to model kind of exposed fire. So it might not be great for this particular map, but if I look at, for example, what happened here? Lost my background somewhere. Let's try this one. These campfires, for example. If I were to use the flickering light effect, they're nice. They kind of look like a big bonfire in terms of the way that the light is pulsing and flickering, but the center of it kind of lacks the punchiness of like a true sort of exposed flame. So torch can give us that like really central, like intense kind of color burn, like glow of like the fire is right here at the very center. And it's really great for people carrying torches. It's really great for torch sconces, fireplaces, bonfires, anywhere that you have like an exposed flame. This animation is going to look really, really good attached to that. Like here's a fire pit, for example, in the middle of this tent where I can, make it make it like this flickering brazier. So anyways, really nice stuff with the torch animation, something that I'm super excited about. I've always wanted a torch that had like a bit more like strong looking like central flame. And so now we have that, and so I'm really, really happy about it. Let's see here. Moving on. This one you're going to really like, I'm sure. So we previously, and in V9, we have light sources that have a checkbox for whether or not the light is gradually illuminated. So for example, with gradual illumination on in V9, you get kind of a smooth fade between different lighting levels, bright, dim, and dark. But in V10, that checkbox for gradual illumination has been replaced with a slider, which is called attenuation. And attenuation is a little bit of a technical term, but it is, I think, a good term to use for this. Where as I turn attenuation down, less attenuation means you have sharper division between the different layers of the light. So there's a much sharper definition between bright, dim, and dark. If, for example, I turn attenuation all the way up, you get an extremely smooth and extremely gradual control over how your light source fades from its brightest point to darkness. And so you have full control over how attenuation plays out across the range of this attenuation slider. And so you can use this to achieve just exactly the look that you want for your light source, whether you want it to be more kind of beautiful and gradual and realistic, or whether you want it to be a little bit more like rules focused, where, you know, maybe for the rules of your game system, you need to have a more clear differentiation between the types of the light levels that are in play. There's other reasons why you might want low attenuation as well. So yeah, really excited by that change. And your existing lights will migrate automatically, where previously the false checkbox for gradual illumination ends up mapping to, I think, like 0.25 or so on the attenuation slider, because that was sort of what looked the most closely. And then the true setting for attenuation maps to like 0.6 or something like that. But now you have the control to change it further to have more or less as you desire. Yeah, statue has crazy boobs. That's true. Cannot deny it. All right, let me relight my courtyard now that I've shown the demo here. All right. This stuff is all probably stuff I can skip. So one thing that was highlighted in comments is that the animation for like when you direct someone's attention to a certain location on the map, that animation is, you know, currently it's really, really smooth. I found the bug again where the pings are like registering at the wrong coordinate. So it's definitely reproducible. We'll have to figure out what's doing that. But yeah, the animation is really smooth. And part of the reason that the animation is so smooth is that we refactored the canvas animation API and library, where previously we just used this canvas animation animate linear method, but that's been replaced with a generalized animate method, which supports custom easing functions. So what that means is that when we're panning from one area of the canvas to another, we can get like a really beautiful, like gradual slow pan that uses non-linear easing. For example, like let me use the API here to, let's do like canvas animate pan. We'll animate to like 5,000, 5,000, and we'll do it sort of over the course of 3 seconds. So like here I can do this kind of slow pan down to the outer edge of the scene. Maybe I'll do like 5 seconds. And the animation will like gradually ramp in and gradually ramp out, and it's super, super smooth, buttery smooth. So that's part of our new improved sort of animation framework that we have that supports the option of different sort of non-linear easing functions, which is great. And not only can that be used for panning the canvas, but it can also be used for like moving a token or animating, you know, I'm not using non-linear easing yet for it, but if we did, for example, like the scrolling status text here, like this is currently scrolling linearly, but we could have the status text kind of zoom in and, you know, ease out in a non-linear easing. So there's a lot of nice things you can do with animation there. We haven't I think by default we plan to keep token movement as linear easing, because while it looks a little bit nice to sort of like ramp into and ramp out of a movement, it also, I think there is kind of like a mechanical interpretability of having tokens move at like constant speed. Now, of course, if you're in the system and you're controlling your token movement, you can now pass in some parameters that could control or configure that. But I think probably by default, we're going to keep token movement as linear. We might put like a little bit of easing on either side of it just to kind of, just for aesthetic reasons, but yeah. All right, we also optimize the performance of visibility testing in the site layer. So this is like testing if I'm this Acra token, can I see this guard or not? And therefore is the guards token displayed? So this computation for like, is this other token visible or not, has been optimized in some nice ways. It's a little faster, it's able to skip some checks. All right, so that gets through new features and brings us to the big ol' honking chapter about breaking changes and code architecture and whatnot. So there's a lot to dig into here, and I'm excited to get into it because I think it's really important for developers that we get a chance to talk through some of this stuff and explain it. But I do realize that maybe the next bit of this stream will be a little bit less interesting to some of you who are more interested in kind of the user-facing features and functionality that V10 is going to bring. There's obviously like some exciting stuff that has been added in this particular version, and there's going to be a lot more user-facing features in Prototype 2, which will be our next release. But I think I'll take a moment here to like maybe do a little interlude and take some user questions, and then not for too long, maybe just 15 minutes of questions, and then I'm going to talk about the architectural changes, and then I'll do more questions again at the end. So if you could, for this section, like ask me any questions you have about like the features of V10, and I'll handle questions about like the API or the underlying software architecture of V10. I'll handle that after the next bit. So feel free to ask some questions that you have. If I could get you to preface your question with like question, I'll be able to pick it out from chat a little bit easier, and I can answer some Q&A that you have. Question from I Like Bread. Can tours also use map pinging and nonlinear movement? Yeah, so a cool thing about tours is that basically since it's part of the Foundry framework, and because you have the ability to do asynchronous steps before or after you display a certain tour step, you really can almost conceptually have a tour do just about anything. Like you could have a tour that like moves a token for you and like automates something and then shows a tooltip, or like you could conceivably have a lot of sort of guided automation as part of tours, and it could potentially be used for storytelling purposes, although you wouldn't necessarily need the tour functionality for that. But yeah, it's a neat idea. Similar question from Mooman about like, do tours handle canvas elements like tokens? In terms of like handle, no, but I think there's ways to work around that. So for example, like if you wanted to have a tour step that highlights like where a certain token is and references that, you would need to, as a pre-step to your tour step, create an HTML element that you can then use as the focus for your tour step. The reason that's possible, and that doesn't sound like just like an impossibility, is that we have the synchronized HTML layer of the canvas, the HUD, which is synchronized to be positioned and transformed the same way that the canvas is transformed, which is why, for example, like the token HUD here, like these are HTML elements. So like I could make a tour step attached to like the, hide or reveal the token, or I could make a tour step attached to these status effects, or I could make a tour step attached to the, health bar input field. So as long as you can like make an HTML element that's positioned where your canvas element is, you could then hook the tour step onto that, and it would basically simulate the behavior of making it look as if your tour is highlighting something on the canvas. So it would require like a little bit of a intermediary thing. And as we start making our own core tutorial tour, it's possible that we might end up making that something that like we provide as part of the API, because it might be a use case that we also have. Question from Discord from Unsoluble. Is the central burn in the torch animation affected by the attenuation slider? Good question. I don't actually think so, but I do think that there's a good argument that it should be. So, yeah, it looks like the answer is no. But I like that suggestion, and so I'll forward that on to SecretFire, that we could make the central flare, I'll call it the central flare of the torch animation, we could make that affected by attenuation also. I like it. JDW asks, do you have any use case in the current code that you'd want to pass the new web worker API? Yeah, there's definitely some. So one that's like a key use case that I actually benchmarked, and it benchmarked very favorably. I just didn't have time to like finalize using it this way. When a scene is first initialized, or when the walls on the scene change, we have to look for intersections between walls, so that if you have walls like this, that the site associated with those walls is rendered correctly, where there's this like the intersection point between the walls is actually taken into account as part of the computed polygon. And so for that, we need to compute all of the wall intersections. And in a scene that has, thousands of walls, you need to check for many, many, many intersections between line segments in order to find these intersection points that have to be included in the computation logic for the polygon. So that's a particularly like expensive task that has to happen when a scene is initialized or rendered. And that's the kind of like sort of purely mathematical task that if we delegate that to a different worker thread, we can actually do it much faster than if it's stuck on the main thread along with everything else. So I think that's an example. There's also another example is that there's some great things you can do with off-screen canvas. So you can actually have a canvas element in an off-screen sort of headless worker thread. It's called the off-screen canvas API. And so for things like converting, like rendering a certain texture down to get like a thumbnail of that texture, or, taking some, compositing some canvas image and then saving it as a file, or like taking a PNG and re-encoding it to WebP. Like these are things that could be done with an off-screen canvas that can be done faster and without blocking the main thread. And so those are some like key example use cases that I'm sort of most focused on as first steps. All right, scrolling. Question from Templar's Knight. Like the new flare effect, but I would be happy about a kind of wind emulation. Yeah, that'd be cool. We don't currently, this sort of highlights like the ceiling of where Foundry could go someday is like incredibly high. We don't currently have, for example, as part of like scene configuration, a like wind direction field. But we could absolutely have, as part of our scene configuration, like a wind direction field that maybe if you're using like a snow or leaves or some other weather effect, like the way that weather effect is rendered could be affected by the wind direction. And so could, flickering torches, like we could also link into that wind direction the appearance of like a flickering torch where it kind of gusts, or it guts towards the direction of the wind more than it does towards anything else. So like the possibilities are there, and we just can't do everything right away. But yeah, currently it doesn't like shift where the epicenter of the flame is, but there is some really cool stuff that could be done. Guitar guy Nick, sorry, actually, let me not skip over. There's some good questions here I don't want to skip over. Myriadis asks about a keyboard shortcut to temporarily suppress cursor location. It's not something we've scoped, but something we could consider doing, yeah. That's interesting feedback. Maybe you could work with us to write it up as a suggestion on Discord or on GitLab. A question from Jensen Bears about recently suffering a lot in regard to data loss, update events, shared journal permissions, players editing, autosave functionality. There's kind of a lot to unpack there. Part of it has to do with just general support for persistence and compatibility of Foundry data. Part of it has to do with journal entries specifically. The part that has to do with journal entries specifically, I'll have a much better answer for you once we get to V10 Prototype 2, once we have done the work that we're intending to do on the journal system. I think some of the work that we're intending / hoping to do with the journal system will address part of your question that has specifically to do with like collaborative editing or auto-saving of journal entries that are being edited by a player. As for like general aspects of like data loss and compatibility, there's a lot of work that's gone into V10 in order to make improvements in that regard. I already talked about some of them with regards to like the ability to construct an invalid document and to fix that invalid document by correcting its data. There's other changes that I'm going to discuss after the break that have to do with compatibility layers for migrations and shimming that do a lot to try and help with this. So maybe more answers on that question coming both in Prototype 2 but also later in today's stream. Can a tour ask questions of users? Like, could you use this as a first-time setup step to like elicit input from the user? In theory, you could, yes, because your tour step can contain arbitrary HTML, so you could put input fields in a tour step. You could prompt the user for input as part of a tour step. When the user completes that tour step, you can have a post-step handler in your tour code that extracts the input that the user provided in the step and then makes some configuration as part of it. So yeah, you could, in theory, also use tours to kind of elicit initial user configuration of things. Looking for another question. Question from Holgertron. What's the investment in new features versus refactoring improvements, for example, in performance? Good question. So I think ultimately, like, it ends up being kind of close to maybe like 40-60 in terms of like refactoring and investing in the underlying architecture versus building new features. Particularly though, in this update, a lot of the refactoring and architectural work is front-loaded. So we do like a lot of that early in the update cycle, and then towards the end of the update cycle, it would be mostly just sort of like new features. But yeah, I mean, we probably spend maybe short of 50%, but maybe close to 50% of our work in like hardening and improving existing functionality versus just building new stuff. We end up doing a lot of that each update, I think. In some senses, I think that's really good, and in some senses, maybe our community, some folks in our community might justifiably wish that we did a little bit less revisiting of stuff that we've already done. But it's something that I believe is really important for the longevity of the software, and so we emphasize it a lot. All right, let's see here. Can we configure 0 tooltip delay for new tooltips? Asks Claude Kenilol. I don't think that the activation delay is... It's kind of configurable, but not as like a UI-based setting. There is a tooltip activation milliseconds static, like constant on the tooltip manager class, where if I were to say set, tooltip manager tooltip activation ms equals 0, then you would have you would then have instantaneous activation of these tooltips, as you can see here. So I don't know whether we'll add like a core control for like 0 delay on tooltip activation or not, but it is something that's exposed to the API so that mods or users can kind of configure that in a way. We'll see. Might become a setting, might not. I don't know. Question from TJ Lanza. There are existing but no longer compatible modules that provide some additional but more basic lighting options. Flashing on-off, switching back and forth between two colors, digital screen like flicker. Yeah, so like mundane or modern animation types. It's a good suggestion, and I think definitely we should work to have some other options like that available. The way that the lighting shaders are designed is that it's designed to be very extensible by community modules who can add new animations. But we don't want to just say, well, you know, modules can do it. Like, I do think we will continue expanding over time the options of core animations. And maybe as we think about doing that, maybe focusing on some less fantastical light source options would be a good area to focus on. Macarena Taco asks, can you go into more detail about the collaboration between Foundry and DriveThruRPG? Yeah, sure, I can talk about that for a little bit. Really exciting announcement that we had yesterday that we have partnered and integrated with DriveThruRPG so that publishers and content creators can sell content on DriveThruRPG. So DriveThruRPG/FoundryVTT. There's a bunch of... Oh, they got our banner up now. That's nice. There's a bunch of titles available for Foundry, which can begin to use the premium content system that we have built into the software. And not all of these are premium content. Like some of them, you just get a zip file if you purchase it. For example, like these maps from Heroic Maps, beautiful maps, by the way. But it is also possible now for to sell sort of premium content integrated with our content system through DriveThru. So the way it works is if you were to buy a product on DriveThru, like the Demon Queen Awakens, cough cough, hint hint, you should buy it. It's great. Then you would get a content key that you can activate on the Foundry website to activate the product, or you can even provide your username when you check out at DriveThru, and it'll be automatically activated to your account. You still get the key either way, but it would be automatically activated. So yeah, this is like the beginning of what we hope will be an extended and long-term partnership with DriveThruRPG, and we are really excited to partner with them because they're an amazing, established, really well-known marketplace for selling digital RPG content, and they have a huge network of publisher relationships, and I think it's going to be a really great partnership both for us as well as just for building the quality of the Foundry ecosystem. And I expect that this is the beginning of a number of things that we will be doing in collaboration and in partnership with DriveThruRPG. This is the first step that we are able to announce today, or yesterday as it were, but yeah, it's really exciting for us, and I think this is not the end of that work thread. This is the beginning of what we're going to be doing with them. All right. Let me skip ahead slightly. Just let me try and get some of these highlighted questions. Florian, when can I finally run a game for you? I hope soon, Florian, but I've been so busy lately. You have to have mercy on me. We'll find time, though. We owe it to each other to make that happen. Frenic Gaming asks, what's the biggest selling point of the update in your opinion? I think Journal V2 will be the highlight of it, although I think Vision Modes is also going to be really fucking excellent. Revelo Waldo asks, can a tour be client-specific? So all players have to go through the same training step individually. That is the default. Actually, that is the default behavior of tours, is that they are client-specific. So every individual player would be prompted, unless I mean the tour can configure like who to show the tour to, but each individual player would go through the tutorial. Yeah, so Akaito asks about like a tour's waiting area. So we haven't built this yet, but like as we continue developing the tours functionality, we're going to need exactly something like this. So tours will be able to be queued up, but only one tour can be happening at a time. So if multiple things want to give you a tour, there's going to be some priority order between those. There's also going to need to be some UI so that you as the client can choose which tour you want to do, if any, or to, you know, dismiss tours you want to just skip completely and not do. So there does need to be some UI that shows you like, these are the tutorials or the tours that you have, that you're being encouraged to do, and like this is the one you're currently doing, but you can switch to a different one, or you can dismiss them, or whatnot. But at the end of the day, only one tour is happening at a time, and that's something that the software will be designed to enforce. Comment from Lord Zeal: it would be ideal if the API allowed each registered tooltip to specify its own delay rather than relying on one global setting. Noted. Let's see here. Looking for questions. Now that the DriveThruRPG integration is live, are there any other platforms excluding D&D Beyond that you'd like to work with? Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I don't know if you mean specifically marketplaces, but there's definitely other services and platforms out there in the ecosystem of TTRPG stuff where I would love to work with them more closely. So, you know, we're always, we actually have, I'd say, I'm trying to count, we have actually just two because one finished recently, but we had until recently 3 other integrations that we're at various stages of working on. 2 of which have not yet been announced, one of which finished fairly recently, which was the game board support. I can give a shout out to that. So under systems and modules, we now have game board support. Game board is a cool product. It's a like face-up it's a face-up display for playing board games and tabletop role-playing games together. So it's kind of a face-up monitor that has like touch and token support, and we have Foundry compatibility on Game Board now, so that if you get your hands on a Game Board, you can use Foundry VTT as a client. The Game Board can be a Foundry VTT client that connects to your server and displays your maps, and you can use tokens with it with touch control. And the token bases are really cool. Like the token maps to your token in the app, so that when you move your physical mini, it moves the location of your token inside the VTT. It's pretty cool stuff. Question from Damien2M, can we have non-radial light sources like squares and triangles? Not currently, in that I can't offer that to you today, but I can say that part of what we're doing with some of the other changes that I will talk about in just a moment is to enable that as a possibility, where we'll be able to have light sources in the future. I'm not going to promise this for V10 because it probably won't happen in V10, but in the future, we do want to support light sources, sound sources, and things that can be various shapes, where the circular point-based source is kind of the default maybe, but there could be other options similar to how drawing tools work, where if you wanted a square or a circle or a arbitrary, maybe not freehand, but if you wanted like a arbitrary polygon, I guess I have Bezier smoothing kind of turned on here. That's awkward. I'll have to, how did that happen? Oh, I do have smoothing factor configured by default. Let me get rid of that. If you wanted like an arbitrary polygon shape where, you know, your light source takes the shape of a specific figure, part of the work that we've done in the API that I'll talk about after I get done with this set of questions is designed specifically to empower that to be possible. So I don't know when that will actually come good, but we're laying the groundwork to support that. Question from DarkOS Phoenix. Speaking of marketplaces, is there any plan for launching Foundry in its release form and localization for clients outside EUA. I mean, so I want to make sure I'm not misunderstanding the question, but we basically can and currently do sell the software worldwide. We've been blessed to have customers from, a huge number of different countries and locales. And our approach to localization has been that we don't necessarily think we can do a good job with the size of team that we have of providing like a high degree of faithfulness like French or Spanish, or not to mention any more sort of niche language of the software. And so we are really focused on making sure that we provide good tools that the community can provide those translations. So our current approach is to sell the software with core support in English and to do whatever we can do to support the translation and localization efforts of the community to support other languages like Hungarian or French or Spanish or anything else, Polish for core. So yeah, I mean, I think that's the strategy that we're currently on and that we will remain on for the foreseeable future. You mean being able to buy in your currency instead of buying in dollars? Yeah, so we currently support USD, I think CAD, although maybe I can't remember if Canada is still in USD or not. GBP and EUR as purchasable currencies. We probably will expand our set of purchasable currencies at some point in the future, but it's not trivial to do that, and so I think we really want to focus on doing that only when there's a really strong reason to. Okay, cool. Well, I think I got to the end of some questions, so I want to talk more about the API. Question from A Wizard for Hire. Any chance of compendium storage coming for prefab construction and sharing? Probably / possibly someday, but nothing in our scope at this time or as part of V10. That would be something we might consider for the longer term, but we haven't made any plans to do that. Okay, let me get my playlist continued here. All right, I'm gonna take a little short break and use the restroom, get something to drink, and then when I get back, I think I might try and do a little giveaway for some folks that are watching. Maybe I can give away a license key or two and maybe a copy of The Demon Queen or two. I think that would be fun to do, and it's something I haven't done in a while. So I will take a break. I'll be back in about 5 minutes, maybe a little less. And all you need to do to be eligible for the giveaways is to be logged into Twitch while you're watching the stream. So if you're currently just watching but you're not logged into Twitch, be sure to log in so that you'll show up. Your username will show up in the list. And when I get back, I will grab everyone out of the list and put them into a roll table, and we'll give it a spin. All right, folks, I will be back in just a moment. Don't go anywhere. I've got more to talk about for this update still to come, more questions of yours to answer. I'll be back in a minute. Hello, I'm back. Welcome back, and thank you to those of you who stuck around. I saw some questions in chat while I was out about the awesome music that is playing during the stream. I put a link in chat as well, but it is Vinsvept, a composer on YouTube who makes Celtic-inspired fantasy / folk music. They're wonderful, excellent, really great music, and even better is that they generously share their work under Creative Commons. So it's pretty amazing, and you can support them on Patreon as well. So I encourage you to check it out. Someone can give me well, I guess no one can give me the proper pronunciation because you can't actually talk to me right now, but I'll try again at some point. Sorry, Toblin, to let you and your Swedish cohort down. All right. So, giveaway. I took everyone who was in stream, and actually really good turnout today. Amazing. 420 blazing of you are in the roll table. And so I think what I'm going to do is roll the old D420, and we will, we'll pick a couple of license keys to give away, or Demon Queen Awaken keys. So I think what I'll do is I'll say that there are maximum of 2 license keys, and then there's an unlimited number of Demon Queen Awakens keys. So we'll do 4 winners today. And if you're a winner, you can either choose the software license or the Demon Queen Awakens adventure. So if you're a winner, all you'll need to do in chat is post something to accept your prize, and either say that you'd like the license key, the Foundry VTT license key, or the Demon Queen Awakens adventure. So let's go ahead and drum roll, please. And let's spin the old Dev Q&A stream giveaway table. And let's see what we got. Oh, it's going far. R. Lovendeer, number 324. R. Lovendeer, you are the first winner. I'm going to go ahead and spin again while we wait to see if R. Lovendeer is here. Drum roll. Number 126, Elf Taro. Elf Taro, you are the second winner. If you are here, the 2 of you, you can let me know if you prefer a Foundry VTT license key or if you'd like the Demon Queen's adventure. R. Lovendeer accepts the adventure. Awesome. I will get that issued to your account. What you'll need to do is please send me a DM that lets me know your username or email address on the Foundry website, and I can get that adventure issued to you. Let's go ahead and spin again and see if we can get a 3rd and 4th winner. Number 3 is Shorty Verret, 94, number 342. Shorty Verret, 94. If you are here to accept your prize, let us know if you're interested in a Foundry VTT license key or the Demon Queen Awakens adventure. Shorty Verret, 94. Oh, I see a message from Elf Taro, but I don't know which prize they prefer. I see actually Pride Wings and the Foundry VTT logo, so maybe they want the license key. But Elf Taro, you can... Oh, adventure, sorry. Okay, you both want the adventure. I love it. Thank you. All right, Shorty Verret, the Foundry license keys, and you also want the adventure. I love that everyone's interested in the Demon Queen adventure. It's a lot of fun. I hope you'll really enjoy it. Let's give another giveaway. Armor Piercing Tiger. I think this is someone... I think Armor Piercing Tiger has won something on one of our streams before. Number 33, Armor Piercing Tiger. Well, yeah, I figured a lot of people already have Foundry keys, so... it's good if you want to get to a friend, or if you, for whatever reason, don't. But it's nice to... Oh, that's Roman. Armor Piercing Tiger is one of my employees. Let's not include Roman as the winner of the giveaway. Sorry, Roman. You already have Demon Queen Awakens because you fucking wrote the thing. Let's go again. Viral Kendo, number 401. You are our 4th winner, Viral Kendo. If you are here, you are eligible for either a Foundry Virtual Tabletop software license or the Demon Queen Awakens Premium Adventure for Foundry VTT. Let's see if we can get viral kendo. Yes, 8-bit, there absolutely is. We just, as part of our DriveThruRPG integration, got Demon Queen ourselves listed on DriveThruRPG, where you can buy the Demon Queen Awakens adventure from DriveThruRPG under the Foundry VTT category. Maybe Nath or one of our Discord mods can put a link to that product in the Twitch stream chat. Viral kendo, did we get anything from Viral kendo yet? Going once. Going twice. It is an adventure for 5th edition, if that influences your decision-making one way or another. Potentially you might be able to convert it to a system of your choice, but we don't offer that out of the box, I'm afraid. All right, let's roll again. Viral kendo, your time has expired. Number 308. Rabulius. Sounds like a emperor from Elder Scrolls. Rabulius Septim. Rabulius. All right, thank you for the pronunciation guide. I see that you're here in chat. Would you prefer to have a Foundry VTT license key, or you would take the adventure? All right, adventures all around. I love it. I'm very happy with that outcome. I will get the 4 of you issued with Demon Queen Awakens adventure keys added to your Foundry VTT accounts. All you need to do is DM me here on Twitch. Let me know your username or email address on the Foundry VTT website so I can find your account and get those keys added to you. And good luck. I hope you play the adventure with your friends and enjoy it, and I hope they die. They're characters, that is. I'm not a monster. All right. Let us get back into the update highlights for V10. This is going to now, the second part of this stream is going to focus a little bit more on the API changes that will affect developers in V10. So I showed some nice sort of user-facing and functionality improvements, but there are a number of important API changes that I would like to review with you all. So I apologize in advance if this portion of the stream gets to be a little bit more dull for those of you who are not developers. But you may find it interesting nonetheless. Architecture and infrastructure. The Electron version provided by new builds, specifically of V10, is now Electron 17. So Electron 17, lots of new features. It includes Chromium 98, Node 16, as well as a couple of other interesting things. So new installations of the Foundry software in V10 would be Electron 17. All core dependency packages have been upgraded, so there's a list here. I will continue maybe updating this over time, or maybe we'll do it version by version. But here's a diff of the dependencies that we are using and their version changes. Perform a comprehensive pass through the client-side software, removing classes, attributes, methods which were deprecated in a past release and are no longer supported by the V10 API. So for those devs, I mean, we're going to try and do a better job of this ourselves this time, of providing like a V9 to V10 migration guide for developers, but this is probably the first issue that you should take note of in that regard. So this issue consolidates a list of references in pre-V10 which would have worked with a warning, but no longer work at all. So for example, if you were previously using const entity types, you were able to continue getting away with that for a while. Now you can't get away with it any longer, and you have to switch to const document types. So this issue 6738 will continue updating it over time. In fact, I'm actually going to go ahead and shift this issue to the next prototype 2. We'll just keep this issue as sort of like an evergreen documentation reference of what those changes are, and I'll continue adding to it as we go throughout v10. So I'll try and keep it sorted and, let people know exactly what needs to change. But this is a list of, if you were doing any of these things before, you must change. No. All right, we added a core ESLint configuration that we have adopted internally to the team as a mechanism to continue improving and standardizing our code and documentation quality. As you can see, there's still some linting that needs to be done. For example, in the new tooltip API, looks like I'm missing a semicolon. Thanks, ESLint. We got another thing here, but anyways, for the most part, it's been good. We've caught a lot of things and improved and standardized some things as a result of our linting rules that we now have. And we thought it best to ship those linting rules that others can also see in case you either want to use them yourself or adopt them or just sort of see what we're using. So the ESLint configuration file that we are using is now shipped with the code. So when you install v10, you can get this particular ESLint configuration as well. All right, we also have concluded the deprecation period for some old package manifest syntax, although I would say stay tuned on this because I think we're going to revisit some aspects of the package manifest in prototype 2. But there was some old syntax that could have been used in pre-v10 that now no longer can be used in terms of some of those package manifest fields. Certain package fields that were previously arrays are now sets. They're using the new set field. So for example, if I look at like game, system, the D&D 5e system, some of its fields, the system data rather, some of its fields would now be sets rather than arrays. So like authors, the compendium packs that the system ships with. So we're using sets for some things where the specific order may not matter. Although I do think we need to recalibrate this for things like CSS or JavaScript. Can't see that, it's behind the webcam. Sorry about that. Let's put that over on the other side of the screen. Thank you. So I was just showing like system data. Some things are sets now that were previously arrays, like the authors of a package or the compendium packs it contains. Although I think we are going to recalibrate some things to maybe go back to being arrays, because I think that like styles and scripts, maybe those should remain arrays because they need to be strictly ordered in terms of like their dependency order. So we may recalibrate a couple of things here, but we were exploring use of the new set field as part of our package data, and so that shows up here. Introduce the config debug compatibility configurable flag that allows the client to specify a compatibility level from const compatibility modes. So let me show you how this shows up. In constants, there are a list of compatibility modes which are supported. If silent, nothing will be logged. If warning, a message will be logged at the warn level. If error, a message will be logged at the error level. And if failure, an error will be thrown. Maybe we should rename this to throw. I don't know. Food for thought. But the way that compatibility modes works is that we have augmented a lot of our logging of compatibility-related warnings so that when we log certain details about a compatibility change, we can do that in a way that takes your compatibility mode into account. And so you can configure the strictness of your logging to match your desired usage of the software. So if you wanted, for example, any compatibility mode to throw an error and force that issue to be changed before you can proceed, you can make it more or less strict as you desire. rename any remaining code or documentation references to admin key to admin password for clarity and consistency. There were a few lingering holdouts in the code where admin key was like the variable name or the label or something that was used. Now everything should refer to the admin password as the server administrator password. All right, now the big chunk on documents and data. The core, like the most significant API and infrastructure improvement in V10 so far is the addition of the data model class. So the data model class is under common abstract. It's the abstract data model. And it includes all of the core functionality for definition of data schema and for various functionalities related to working with a data model, like cleaning, validation, initialization, and then serialization or loading and unloading. So everything is basically a we're trying to make sure that the data model concept and construct is used throughout the software whenever we have some piece of data that needs to be modeled, where the input data needs to be validated, it needs to be structured in a certain way. We need to trust that the data that we are using in a certain area is configured properly. So for example, things like the application configuration, which is all of the server-side application config parameters, like are you using a proxy port, or do you provide SSL certificates, or are you compressing static files? All of the schema related to those types of pieces of data are now modeled as data model subclasses. And I'll talk more about the schema definitions and the different field instances in a moment, but we're basically really pushing the desire, at least for ourselves internally. It's not something that modules and systems are forced to do outside of the requirements for working with documents, but we're really trying to encourage using data models to define these types of data structures where it makes sense to do so. So in addition to like the application configuration, we might also use this for things like package data in terms of the package manifests for different package types, like a world versus a system versus a module. And so this gives us helper functionality as well as data cleaning and validation of configurable degrees of strictness around these data structures that are really essential to the execution and operation of the software. All of the data models based on this paradigm rely on defining a structured schema, and all of the data schema for all of, for example, the different documents are defined within the document level representations of those data model classes. So for example, for like the cards document, the schema of the cards document is defined within that document definition, and all of these individual fields have their own inherent cleaning, validation, serialization, initialization methods that they can use. And so this is really a powerful way to define the schema that gives a lot of inherent functionality. So it's something that it's probably not so obvious, how you use it or why you would want to use it when you're just looking at the code. But I trust that developers who get their hands on this and play around with defining their own data models for aspects of their module or system where they are dealing with a specific structure, I trust that you'll find a lot of value in this activity. And it goes beyond just typing the data. There's a lot of functionality of these fields beyond just declaring the type. But yeah, it brings a lot of structure and a lot of coherency to the types of things that you can do. We do have backwards compatibility for both the old for both the old document data class, which is now just redirects to data model, as well as for all of the old sort of so all of these fields that you saw me using in these schema, they're all instances of this data field class that provide various functionalities, like a Boolean field if you want a true false in your document. The old school sort of object style field references are still here, but they're all deprecated. So there is some backwards compatibility, but really if you're using this in your own module, you should migrate to declaring these fields yourself, is what the guidance would be. We're probably going to take these away starting around V12. All right, now the big one. Reinvent the document class as a subclass of data model instead of as a separate logical layer which contains a data model. This is the most significant architectural change which we have made or anticipate making in V10. It eliminates the separation of document functionality from the underlying data structure that defines that document, where now those are part of the same fundamental instance. This was a big change. There's a lot of considerations, consequences that are involved in it. There's 3 linked GitLab issues that relate to this change. The most significant of which is 6841, which was the initial RFC that we reviewed with our developer community. We received almost unanimous support for this proposal, which was really surprising to us because we thought it was actually pretty controversial. There was good concerns. There were very good concerns and important concerns that were raised by the community as a result of this proposal, but I think we were able to navigate those concerns quite well, although not completely perfectly. We've done absolutely the best job that we can, and we'll continue to work on making sure that this particular migration is as smooth as we can make it. But I don't want to sugarcoat this by making it seem like it's just going to be completely smooth sailing. This is an important, arguably necessary, otherwise I don't think we would be doing it, and impactful change to the Foundry software, which we're going to need to work with all of you to, make our way through. An important linked issue in the notes is this one, 6849, which, like the other migration guide that I mentioned, this one contains all of the... These are deprecations and renames which have backwards compatibility but are changed as a result of the document consolidation. So this was a really huge thing. I want to show a couple of examples of like what the outcome is, so people can get a sense of what the change that comes about as a result of this. I have to remember that my webcam is down here, so let me make my console window like, let's see, let me put it like here, and hopefully that's above where my webcam is. So let's consider, for example, like game.user. This is the current user that is that you're logged in as. Game.user is a user document, but all of the fields of the user schema are now top level fields within the user document. So things like active, avatar, color, flags, hotbar, these all used to be formerly within user.data, and they are all now at the top level of the user document. There is no more user.data. There's no inner data object. All of the fields of what was previously the inner data object are now top-level fields of the user document itself. There is a quite tricky and functional shim for data. So whenever you try and reference .data, for example, if I reference game.user.data, well, I'm going to get an informative warning that the verbosity of that is configured by that compatibility level flag that I showed you before. it's going to provide me a backwards compatible data structure for what used to be in user.data. So you can continue using it. Your existing code should, by all rights, continue to, work effectively, but this provides backwards compatible functionality that will help you weather this change. But it is important to note that all of those fields are now under the top level document itself rather than in an underlying data object. So that's one example of how this looks. Let's look at what like an actor looks like. So suppose I select this token and I'll get the actor for the token. Within the actor, which is a 5e subclass of the actor document, all of the, there's a number of getters and setters that the 5e system may have defined, but all of those fields of the actor schema, like flags, effects, image, items, name, ownership, prototype token, sort, system, these are all now attributes of the top level actor class that again have gotten rid of .data. Now another thing that you'll notice is missing in the actor is .data. So if we've moved everything from .data to the top level, you're thinking, well, what about that inner .data? I was having to do like .data everywhere and it sucked. That is now the system data object. So instead of just shifting data.data to, one data, we've renamed it to system to more accurately reflect the nature of this inner data object as being associated with the game system. So actor.system is my data structure of system specific actor data. Now, of course, you can still get to it as actor.data.data if you just don't want to let go. But why would you? Because this sucks. So that is like an important consequence of the change. Let's go over the list of things that have had to make way as a result of this change because they're important to note. So actor, card, cards, and item were the 4 document types that previously had inner system data objects. All 4 of those, actor, card, cards, and items, now have system as their top level field. So actor data.data is now actor system, and so on and so forth for all 4 of these types. Another important change that had to happen because we previously had the poorly named permission field on certain actors, certain document types, is the permission field has been renamed to ownership, which is a more clear definition for what it does, and it also removes a collision with the permission getter, which was serving an important role for documents. So for example, if I say actor.permission, this is the permission getter for what is the permission level of the current user for this actor. That was an important getter and we didn't want to rename it. So instead we've chosen to rename the upstream source data for ownership, which is which users have which level of ownership over this particular document. And that has flowed through into the UI as well. So now when you right-click on a document to configure it, the label here is configure ownership. The title of the window is ownership configuration. The text that you're configuring is talking about ownership levels rather than permission levels, which was confusing and confused with user permissions. So this rename of permission to ownership clearly separates the concept of permission from that of which user has which ownership level over which document, and it resolved a couple of the naming collisions that we had as a result of that. So I think you'll get used to this pretty easily. Most people don't have to interact with document.ownership directly. Most of you are going to be using the kind of helper methods like, get test user permission, for example. Like, does the current game user have owner permission over this actor? True, yes, they do. Most of you are going to be interacting with this through this type of helper method. But if you do use the permission singular, it is no longer what you would expect. So that is kind of an immediately breaking change, except, and this is where things get a little bit clever, except if you're going through the legacy shim. You'll notice that actor.permission is the permission getter for what is the current user's permission level, but actor.data permission still redirects you to the ownership object. So if you were previously referencing this in your code, it will continue to work, albeit with a logged warning. And that's because of the way that the new compatibility and shims layer works within the software. I'm going to talk about that for a moment. Every document class, and therefore every document, has two methods that, and not just every document, but every data model instance, in fact, has two methods which are attached to the data model. And they both have to do with deprecations and compatibility. One method is migrate data, which is used to, and these are methods that you don't have to use yourself unless you have a specific and exceptional need to do it. These are things that the software will take care of doing for you automatically. Migrate data is, for a certain data model, it takes care of migrating source data for that data model from an old legacy schema into the new current schema. So this handles forwards migration, but there is a counterpart to this method that every data model has, which is shim data, which is used to backwards translate new schema for the model backwards into provide old style compatibility for its usage. So let's look at what the actor document is doing here so we can understand a little bit more of how this works. In the actor document, it has a deprecations and compatibility section, and that deprecations and compatibility section has two methods. The first is migrate data, which brings old data forward into the new system. So if we had data.data before, we're going to reassign that to data to system. If we had permission before, we're going to reassign that to ownership. If we had a token before, we're going to reassign that to prototype token to be more clear. Shim data goes in the other direction, where if we now, with new style data, have a certain field present, we'll add a backwards compatible shim that will allow the old reference path to still be used. So that is what's allowing permission to exist on the inner data object, because the compatibility layer in the document for getting the old style inner data includes anything that the shim includes. So I probably lost most of you with that, but hopefully you get the idea that if you're still using .data, you're going to have all of the fields in there that you used to have. You're going to have the regular token, you're going to have permission, you're going to have data, but all of these become getters that are going to yell at you if you use them. So if I try and use, actor data token, it's going to give me a warning. And that provides us with two-way compatibility, both moving old data forward into the new model, as well as allowing new data to be expressed in a backwards compatible way so that existing code continues to function as much as feasibly possible. Okay, other data schema changes that are of note. This is an important one. Actor data had a token property, a token field, which by necessity, but also for clarity, has been renamed to prototype token. This is needed to differentiate for the actor document the difference between the prototype token configuration for the actor versus an actual placed token that this actor is associated with. So in the case of, for example, an unlinked token that has its own independent, or what we sometimes call synthetic actor, that actor's token attribute needs to reference to the actual token document which originates that synthetic actor. And so in order to accommodate that, it was most clean to rename token on the actor data to prototype token, which is what it actually is. And so this is a little bit of a disruptive change, but it was a necessary one in order to resolve one of the less convenient conflicts that resulted from this refactor. Other ones to note is that we also clarified the naming conventions for linked documents inside a table result. Oh, I did this and I didn't change the to-do. Well, that's okay. That can become a prototype 2 thing, I guess, maybe. I'll have to update this documentation. It looks like this piece didn't actually get done yet, so this will be coming in prototype 2. We had some fields in table result data that refer to externally linked documents. I think we need to change the naming here to avoid a collision, and we're debating either renaming it to document collection and document ID, or what I'd prefer to do is simply move to using UUIDs here, so there's just a single field and it links to a UUID. Could be in a compendium, could be in your world. I think it's more flexible that way, and so this is something that we're going to continue working on in prototype 2. Other changes, document data renamed to data model, document data update renamed to data model update source. This was a key point of controversy when we were going over the RFC with the community. We were debating different names for this, including apply, which was our initial candidate. We've settled on update source as related to update, which persists the data but is more of a local permutation of your source data. That's used in a number of places, although less commonly by modules. But some of you will be using this and you'll need to take note of this rename. And again, that is also part of the shim. For example, if you were previously doing something like actor.data.update, that method redirects to update source on the parent document with a warning. So all of that continues to provide compatibility in a backwards compatible way. Yeah, and then these were some getters in various document classes where either the getter is no longer necessary and was able to be eliminated, or we changed slightly the functionality of the getter in order to preserve its original intent. I won't go through those blow by blow because they're not very exciting, and they probably don't really affect many of you, but this issue is important to keep an eye on if you are in the process of going through V9 to V10 migration. All right, let's keep going before we all have our eyes get blurry and don't know what words mean anymore. So I talked a little bit about migrate data and shim data, so we probably get that idea. Document metadata and data model schema are now frozen in order to prevent manipulation of those objects that would have unintended consequences. I don't think anyone was actually doing this, but just to make sure that no one's actually doing this, we freeze these in order to keep them from being mutable. Several fundamental document attributes like _source, parent, apps, _sheet, they're configured to no longer be enumerable, so if you iterate over the keys and values of the document, they would not be included in iteration, as they're not necessarily intended to be used in that particular way. We talked about the migration of permission to ownership. That's covered here. Here's an interesting one that will affect a number of different things. We have revisited and overhauled our expectations around usage of base64 data as it relates to being persisted in the database and used within documents. So now a file path field where previously either a file path or base64 could have been used. Now, when you provide base64 data to that file path field, the actual file, an actual file will be saved on disk. So if I pass a big blob of base64 data in as like my actor image or my scene background, that file is actually going to be saved to the user's hard drive. In their world location, or actually not necessarily in their world location. If you're, for example, updating a compendium document in a module, that file would be saved to the module where that compendium lives also. But whatever package is the origin of a document, the uploaded base64 would get put into that package path under the assets subdirectory. So I can show like some examples here of worlds, test world, assets. So in my assets subdirectory, I have actors and scenes. In scenes, I have like some various scene images that have been uploaded via base64. Here's like some actor tests I was doing that differentiate between the file name and captures the actor ID and the field of that document that the base64 came from. So that's going to automatically handle saving base64 to disk and then using a path to the saved file instead of keeping the base64 in the document. That's going to have some significant performance gains. Bigger performance gains, the bigger the base64 was. So if you're using base64 for like a big scene background image, that was actually really hurting you and you probably didn't know it, but it was really hurting you. And so this will rescue you from being hurt in that way. We also provide an initial migration so that when worlds are migrated to v10, base64 will be extracted from their existing documents and saved as a one-time initial migration operation. This is a good example and a good time to remind everyone of why do not attempt to use v10 without backing up your data. Because if you use v10 without backing up your data is going to be migrated. All of these migration changes that I've been talking about here, they're all going to happen and they're all going to be saved to the database. So once that happens, you can't go back. So if you want to test v10, do it on a separate copy of your data so that you can test it safely. And then you can go back to v9 either because you've sandboxed it and you're using a different data path, that's ideal, or you've made a backup and you can roll back to your backup data when you return to v9. But be sure to make a backup of your data, and not just for testing the prototype, but whenever you update a major version of Foundry, even when v10 becomes stable, use that moment when v10 becomes stable to take a backup of your v9 data. You will not regret doing so if anything goes wrong. You can get v9 data forward into v10. You cannot get v10 data backwards into v9. We are not, in fact, time travelers. All right, here's an interesting one. Primary document types now all include an _stats field, which tracks useful information metadata about the document. So we track the system ID, system version, core version, created time, modified time, and last modified by user ID of each top-level primary document. And this is used for auditing and to help with compatibility and migration. So for example, now this won't work immediately and right away because it will take time for this to be, used by users and by modules. But eventually what this will mean is that like, if someone imports a JSON file of like, I'm going to import my actor into this world, I'll be able to know from that source JSON file, was this actor data that's being imported designed for use in this particular game system? Was it created under an older version of the game system and therefore needs to be kind of migrated up to the latest specification? Was it created under an older version of the core software and needs some migration? When was it created? When was the last time that the document was used? If it's documents within your same world, then who was the last user to make those changes? So this can be useful metadata to have about each document that I think folks will end up finding good use cases for taking advantage of. I talked a little bit about non-strict document construction and data validation. Let me show an example of that. So suppose I construct a new actor and I just say like name Andrew. I'm gonna get yelled at because, oh my gosh, I zoomed in so far, it's like become unusable. Let me just put it over here. I'm gonna get yelled at because actors must have a type, or actors must have a name, for example. And I'll get yelled at for providing invalid actor data. You'll notice that the data validation errors that occur are also now much more informative in that if multiple fields of the data model have problems, all of the fields that have a problem will be listed. So you can see, it used to be that just like whatever the first problem that it encountered would be the nature of the error message, but now all problems with the provided data will be highlighted, which is pretty cool. So for example, I can try and create this data, Now, I think this is actually a bad choice because there's probably nothing it can do here. Yeah, so this is a bad example. Maybe I need to make this example a little bit better for actors, but type is definitely required because there's no sort of fallback that could be used instead. But I'm trying to think of what would be a better example. Maybe like new combat. Oh no, that has good defaults. I'm trying to think of a document that doesn't have... Yeah, so suppose we had like combat round -12. Does that actually work? You're fucking kidding me. I don't know. I thought that had to be positive. Oh, here I am trying to demo this feature and I'm like failing horribly to demo the new feature. I might just take a punt on this. There's got to be something I can easily do to demo this. Let's see. Let me look at some documents and think of one that would be good. Okay, like the playlist mode, for example. Let's try that. Let's see if I can actually successfully demo this feature. Yeah, so if I were to try and create a playlist and pass like false as the mode, which is not a valid playlist mode, it would fail, and I also need a name. Well, fuck me, I give up. All right, I think my ability to demo this feature has been broken. It's probably the consequence of streaming for so long. There's also the possibility that something isn't quite working the way that I expect it to be. Probably because fallback cleaning is saving me from my own bad data. Maybe I'll revisit this particular demo in Prototype 2. Ultimately, what I'm trying to do is like pass some bad data to the document constructor and prove that it fails, and then pass that if I try and construct the document non-strictly, it will, tolerate that bad data as best it can. But it seems to not be really coming off for me right now, so I will take a punt on that one and revisit. Let's see. Various scene data schema fields have been consolidated to belong to an inner grid object. So if we look at scene data, it used to be that there were a bunch of properties like grid size, grid color, grid type that were all top-level properties, and we've now consolidated those properties inside an inner grid object. So now scenedata.grid contains all of those fields as inner keys rather than as top-level keys of the scene. This provides a little bit better data organization and is maybe a little bit more semantic in the way that it can be referenced. The reason we're able to do this, and we have taken advantage of this in some other places as well, is that the new data model abstraction that is able to be used, or not just able to be used, but is used, supports the concept of a schema field, which makes it really easy to define inner object structures as part of the data schema. So one thing that was previously was impossible to do is that if you wanted to have like nested data structures where I've got like an outer object and then an inner object, you had to make that inner object a subclass of document data, which was really clumsy, and it added like a lot of additional overhead that was not necessary. So now you have a much more elegant way to define inner data schema for inner objects that can be used to define inner object structures directly in line. And so for something like the grid field, the grid becomes a schema field with all of these inner fields inside of grid, and that makes it really easy to declare this type of data structure without needing a different document model. I see someone mentioning about like how this is really totally going to break a certain module. Eventually, yes, but remember that the backwards compatibility layer will take care of things like grid type will allow you to, provides that backwards compatible shim so that you can still get your old grid type without doing, .grid.type. So, it will yell at you for a while and you will be forced to eventually migrate, but it shouldn't break modules just immediately just because they were used to be doing this. All right, I mentioned previously that we were doing some architectural groundwork to support various shapes as things that we could use to eventually say like make a light source that is in fact like a polygon, where like this polygon shape is like the shape of the light source. As I mentioned, we're not going to have that right away. It's going to be quite some time before we actually get that functionality. But the way that we're approaching that is we've laid some of the groundwork of defining a shape data model, which provides an inner data model that can be used anywhere that we need to model a geometry of different types, like rectangle, circle, ellipse, polygon, possibly cone. We might add cone support to this in the future as well. So anywhere that we need like a geometric shape and we need to store that shape as part of another data model, we can now reuse this shape data concept. And we use it now in the drawing document. So in the drawing document schema, there used to be some top level fields, and you can see in the shim what these used to be, like type, width, height, points. These used to be top level fields of the drawing that now belong to the inner shape object. And so each drawing has a particular shape. Like if I make one here, this drawing that I just created, I'll get it. It has this inner shape data where it's an ellipse, has certain width and height, no points because it's not a polygon. And so this allows us for something like a drawing to keep track of what's the shape of the drawing, but it also means we can start using that shape data in other places as well. So it could be that like a light source now has a shape mask associated with it, or a sound source now has a custom shape associated with it rather than just a point sort of radial source. Now, as I said, we're not doing that right away, but we do have other places where shapes are going to start to be relevant. So, for example, suppose we wanted to eventually do, we know we want to eventually do event triggers. We need to declare that like the following rectangle is like the trigger zone for a certain scripted behavior. We need a way to define the shape, the geometric shape for like what is the initiating trigger zone. Currently, modules are like by necessity doing some stuff like, oh, we're going to use like a drawing, and you're going to make a drawing for that, and then we'll use the drawing to like somehow indicate that for like multi-level stuff. But in the longer term, when we get around to doing things like event triggers, we're going to want a better data structure to use to say like, this is where the event starts inside this circle, and then when you step in this circle, you get teleported over to this circle. So we need two different shapes and we need some behavior between them. So this gives us a better way to standardize and reuse the way that shape data is persisted. The next thing that I wanted to highlight that I'm quite excited about is that chat messages can now contain multiple role instances. So for example, here in my example, like GitLab issue, I can create two different roles, one that's 46 and one that's 68. and then I can create a chat message that contains multiple roles in just a single message. And we see here over here in my chat log that I've got a chat message with multiple roles in the message. They're rendered sequentially in the same message card. Of course, systems and modules and whatnot can style the HTML of like how those appear, but what's important is that the underlying data is present. So we created this chat message, and that message contains an array of 2 different role instances, where previously you were limited to 1 role per message. Now you can still access like m.role. It's going to take the first role out of the array, and it's going to warn you that you're probably doing the wrong thing. So, but given that old messages contained 1 or 0 roles, they're forward migrated trivially, where pre-existing roles as part of a message, they just become an array of 1. But it is important to note that chat messages now contain an array of roles rather than just a single role. And this gets around some ugly workarounds that people were having to do to create a dice pool and put the dice pool inside another role and use the inner dice pool as a way to have multiple roles stored in a chat message. So yeah, good change that was much needed. I mentioned the change of prototype token and associated naming. Okay, we're almost there. I've got just a little bit more to cover, and then I'm going to take a couple questions, and then I'm going to wrap for the day. All right, Font Awesome has been upgraded to the latest version, Font Awesome 6. It upgrades the appearance and names of a number of icons. You probably have noticed during the stream that some of the icons are changed. For example, like we have a new combat icon, which is the crossed swords instead of the fist. We have a new playing cards icon, which is like 2 little decks of cards. We have some new icons for like folders and creating items within those folders. So some of the iconography that the software uses has been updated in order to take advantage of Font Awesome 6 as the new font face that's used there. The drawing config class was previously just a form application, but drawing is a document, so drawing config should be a document sheet. It now is. Same comment for token config. Token config was previously just extending form application directly. It should be extending document sheet and now is doing so. We eliminated the assumption that the core actor sheet would be sorting item documents within the actor strictly like by type. So here in like the 5e sheet, for example, items are sorted like by weapon, by armor, by consumable, by containers, by loot. And it may be that systems want to do that, but there was kind of, if you were inheriting and extending the core actor sheet, you were previously like getting some assumptions baked in with that maybe were stronger than were necessary. So that's been removed. And then just a quick note about the notify parameter of chat log post 1. That's a very trivial little thing. All right. These last ones are just a little bit important, but then we will be done. We've changed some aspects of the way that hexagonal grids are drawn. So this is important. If I am to make a new scene, we'll call it like hex demo. And I will, just use the default sizing and we'll make it hexagons. The way that hex grids are sized has now changed a little bit, and it is more rigorous and it's more thoughtful in the way that is done. So now what is true is that the inner region of the hex scene, where your background image would be, and I'll just draw a big green box so that you know what I'm talking about here. The inner region of the hex scene always starts, for any hex configuration that you use, the top left corner of that inner image always starts with hexes flush against the flush against the sides of the image. And depending on your image dimensions, you may end up with partial hexagons at the bottom and side, depending on whether the width and height of your image divide exactly into an integer number of hexes or not. Here I ended up with a whole number of hexes in the horizontal dimension, but a partial number of leftover hexes in the vertical dimension, and that's fine. But that explains how hexes now overflow. What is also noteworthy is that the amount of padding that is chosen for the scene is now really intelligently chosen to ensure that only full hexagons exist in the playable space. So at the top left of the scene, full hexagons are flush against the outer bounds of the canvas, and all the way to the right and bottom, full hexagons are flush. So the amount of excess padding, and I can configure that by changing the padding percentage, but however much padding is chosen, and that displaced my drawing, but however much padding is chosen is always chosen such that it will contain a exactly full number of hexagons. This also means that the way that hex measurement occurs has been refined slightly to be more accurate and more precise, and that both affects the ruler as well as placed measured templates that use hexes. As a consequence of all of these hex changes, it is actually a breaking change for the way that hex grids are drawn. So this was something that we were gulp, what do? We need to make this change, but yikes. So what we ended up doing is any pre-existing scenes that use hex grid will get flagged with a legacy hex flag that will continue to use the old hex grid computation logic. Newly created hex scenes will use the new hex grid computation logic, and we will probably provide an opt-in migration for legacy hex scenes if you want to upgrade your hex scene to use the new hex configuration logic. A consequence of doing that, though, is that if you previously had a token positioned exactly in a certain hex, after the hex migration occurs, your token might be a little offset where the grid is. So it's not a migration that we wanted to force on everybody because it's something that could mess up people's live scenes. So if you have a pre-existing hex scene, you will still have the old hex computation, including weaknesses potentially with the way that measurement occurs and weaknesses potentially with the way that templates occur. But those weaknesses can be corrected if you switch to the new hex computation. So yeah. There was a lot of work that went into that. And I see someone asking about offset, and yes, so if you have a map where the hex grid is not perfectly flush at the edges, you can still offset that. You can still offset that where you see that your effective inner region would now be no longer perfectly flush, and that can still be done with the grid configuration tool and stuff. So if you need to change your offset, you can do so. Oops. But yeah, that's a useful question. All right, last two. We've introduced a new approach and a cleaned up class for the particle effect. So there used to be a class in the client-side software called weather effect. It was a little bit too specifically named. That class has been renamed to particle effect, and it now uses a new underlying API for defining particle emitters. So the rain, snow, leaves, which we still intend to do more core particle effects in the future. We just haven't gotten around to it yet. But these have all been migrated to use the new specification for defining those particle effects. which is driven by the Pixie.js particle emitter package, where we were previously using the old discontinued Pixie particles library. We've now migrated to the new Pixie particle emitter package. It is a breaking change in terms of how particle effects are defined and configured, but the particle emitter package does provide some assistance, including a built-in method that helps you to migrate your old configuration to the new configuration. Oh, yes, sorry, it was called special effect, not weather effect. Yes, that's correct. My mistake. All right, last one. The behavior of the software when you press Alt or whatever keyboard key you have bound your sort of highlight all objects to. So when I press Alt, I get, all of these tokens that are highlighted with their borders and nameplates and whatnot. There was some pretty bad behaviors that confused the behavior of like Alt with hover. And so if you were like holding Alt but you hover over a token, it was creating a bunch of like bad behaviors where your other highlighted tokens could get lost or displaced or unhighlighted. And so now what we've done is we've made the highlight all operation technically different than a hover operation. So highlight all is no longer calling hover on every single object. Highlight all is just highlighting the objects using some basic sort of logic. It's a design choice that could go both ways, because I can see an argument that users might want every object to have its hover on hover workflows triggered when Alt is pressed, but this ended up being the lesser evil, and so this is the path that we've opted to go down. All right, I'm done. That was it. That was everything. Just like, 3 hours of talking about API changes, no big deal. Ooh, yeah, I need a break. So yeah, V10 Prototype 1, it's pretty chonky. There's a lot in here. There's a lot of big changes, important changes that I think I'm really happy about what we've done and what this will enable us to continue doing throughout the rest of V10. But it is going to be something that for the developer community, we're going to have to work with you closely to, to make sure that you're able to surmount the challenges that you encounter when attempting to migrate to the new version of the software. A note about compatibility: a lot of game systems are actually working with V10, so I think we noticed that we were doing like an audit, D&D 5e, D&D 4e, Twilight 2K, Savage Worlds, Starfinder, I don't know, there's others. These are all systems that are working in V10 without the need for immediate migration. Other systems, maybe not, because there's a collision that has to be resolved or something that doesn't migrate gracefully. And so, we'll be in touch with, we'll provide access for every system author to talk with us and get help, but the scope of impact is going to differ system by system. And if you're a user of a certain system and you want to test V10 under a system, just please be respectful and considerate of whoever the developer of that system is, because some of them may be interested in providing like an early preview version. Some of them may have no interest at all in doing that. For what it's worth, simple world building, D&D, these are systems that you can use pretty reliably for testing V10, but outside of that, check and be considerate of who the system developer is and whether their system is working, without necessary changes. Please back up your data. Please bear in mind that this is the first prototype of a brand new major version. There's going to be lots more changes still to come. Some things that may be breaking now as a result of these changes, we still might have an opportunity to revisit or provide better compatibility for. So I hope that there won't be too much like sky is falling about this, but there are some big changes here, and so, you know, we're going to be on call to talk with you and to help guide you through it. And, you know, as a community, we're all going to lift together. Our team has put a huge amount of work into this version, and it is really great, but we know that there's going to be work needed by the community as well, and so we're going to help you with that burden as much as we can. So please work with us and let us help you, basically. All right. Let me take some questions. For those of you who have survived the stream, either because you just went AFK or because you're actually truly masochistic and you've just stuck with me for this long, let me reward you by answering any remaining questions that you have for a little while, although my voice is starting to go, so I probably won't do more than 15 or 20 minutes of questions. But for those of you who are still with me, hit me with your questions now that we've covered some of the API changes, and let me know what I can answer for you. Claude Kenilol asked, in V7 source, the source was linked in the API documentation. So Claude, we felt that feature was not working well. It was like super laggy. It wasn't searchable. Like, yes, it was linked, but the UX of that feature, in our opinion, sucked. So I don't think we're going to bring that back. Although, about the API documentation, we have deployed now /API/v10. So there is the Foundry VTT/API/v10 documentation path where the built details of all of the new APIs are available. So for example, like the tour, the documentation for the tour class is available in the /v10 documentation. And so yeah, so that is available now for you to use. Although the built-in like reference to exactly where in the code this stuff is found, we don't think we're going to bring that back. One thing we have done, which is a change for us, is we've allowed the unconcatenated client-side code to be distributed with the V10 software. This time intentionally. Once or twice in the past we did that unintentionally. This time we've done it intentionally, so that the individual files for example, like the tooltip manager file, like these individual files are now included in the code that is delivered with V10. So if you wanted to load into your IDE, say the client-side source files that Foundry uses, you can navigate those files as an included library. You can include that directly and have access to like the individual files where these things are defined, rather than having to go to the like monolithic, foundry.js file. Question from Sapient AI: will multiple roles per chat message mean we'll be able to easily add subsequent roles to an existing message? Well, whether or not you can do that easily, I think is a subjective sort of matter of opinion. But yes, you could have a chat message which starts out with just one role, and then an update occurs and adds a second role into that chat message. I can try and demo that for you here, and we'll see if it works. So for example, suppose I create two roles, and I'll create a chat message that contains just the first role. We'll see that here's my chat message with just a single role. I'll get that message, a reference to it, and suppose I want to now update that message to contain two roles. We'll give it a try. We'll try update roles R1, R2. So yeah, there you go. My message was updated, and now it contains two roles instead of just the one. So yes, you can update an existing chat message to append or to add additional roles to it. Florad asks, speaking of migrations, will Foundry ever provide a core way of migrating actors, items, scenes, say an API that you can pass the migration functions to? Yes, possibly. So one of the things, I swore I was going to talk about this and I didn't talk about it. One of the things that you can do in the API in V10 is you can now define custom system subclass types for game system data. So for example, you have like actor.system is this data structure. What you can do in V10 is that you can define a data model that will be used for your system data, and that is able to be customized by type of the actor. So like this actor type is a character. I could have something like a class 5, character data extends data model, or Foundry abstract data model. And using this character data class, I could configure that this character data class should be used to construct this system data. If I were to fully specify this character data class, because it is a subclass of data model, that means that your system data could, just as core Foundry documents do, your system data could include migration and shim methods, which would automatically migrate or provide backwards compatibility for changes to the internals of system data. So not only would you get a more cleanly typed and defined schema of your system data, you'd get data validation, cleaning, you'd also get built-in core support for backwards and forwards compatibility as it relates to your system data, if you go to the trouble of defining your system data as a subclass of data model. That's something that I'm very excited to do for my own homebrew system. I'm excited to see that functionality make it into the 5e system, and I'm excited to see, hopefully, some other system developers take the opportunity to do that in their systems as well. Let's see here. Question from Krymic. In 5e, is get role data going to be renamed to get role system? No, I don't think so, because I think what you're getting there is still the data used to populate the role. So actor.getRole data is not renamed. The data here doesn't refer to system data per se. The data here refers to whatever data is necessary in order to evaluate dice rolls within your game system. So I think that method name does not need to change. Is it possible to have source maps between the concatenated files and the originals? Yeah, actually, we probably should have considered doing that. To be honest, I don't even, I've had access to all of these files since the beginning, and I don't even use source maps. I don't actually find them to be that valuable for my own use case. But I can understand why some people would want them. So yeah, we probably can generate a source map now that we're providing the unconcatenated client-side code. We don't have that already, so it's not an easy thing of just add it in, but that is something that can be generated as part of the concatenation, I'm certain. No question from Dork Elf, but just thanks for everything we're doing. Thank you. Appreciate you coming by and showing support. That means a lot to us. We will get this uploaded onto YouTube. It will be available on Twitch as a VOD almost immediately after the stream, but probably sometime tomorrow we'll get this posted onto YouTube, where people will be able to rewatch it. time to move my native AJV implementation to that of native data models. I hope that goes well. I know that I think it was you or someone else that actually specifically mentioned AJV as something for us to look into. And I did spend some time with it when we were scoping out this work and deciding whether or not to do this work ourselves. So I did actually evaluate AJV as an alternative option, but what I found was there were so many sort of domain-specific use cases that we had for Foundry that, you know, AJV is a library that exists to solve 10,000 different, you know, use cases and needs. But Foundry data fields is a solution that works elegantly well for Foundry VTT specifically. So something like fields system data field or fields foreign document field. These are to a degree sort of domain-specific conceptual fields that have powerful functionality and deep meaning when it applies to the Foundry ecosystem. And that's something that we could get with our own in-house solution that we couldn't really get with a library so easily. And then also with a library, you get 100,000 features that you don't actually need. So there's this just small subset of the functionality you want and the functionality the library provides. We ended up deciding that the sort of bespoke solution was the better one for our case. Scragaruru, same here, no question, but seriously, thanks. Thank you. Really appreciate it. The support from the community is like everything to us, honestly. It's so important to us to have that community support. It's super valuable, both, you know, emotionally, financially, you know, in every way that you can imagine. Like the voices of the community that are positive about Foundry Virtual Tabletop, it's like we would be nothing without that. So thank you. And we're really lucky and happy to be able to do this as our jobs. Ed Heldilo, sorry, I'm butchering that. What exciting things do you see in the farther future? Foundry, its code, module systems, anything you want to mention or talk about? Maybe some wishes as well. Oh gosh, that's such a big topic. You know, we're about to be V10. We're about to be our 2-year anniversary in May, a couple months from now. It's amazing, like so much has happened in 2 years and Foundry has grown so powerful and so capable. I think I should be back momentarily. Sorry about that, folks. There was just a little blip there that didn't survive. Yeah, that question that Ed Heldilo asked me was just too big for Twitch. Things that I would like to see in the future of Foundry. There's so much, but you know, I guess to sort of halfway answer and halfway pass on the question, I would say we've accomplished so much in our first 2 years since launch, but there is still so much that I want Foundry VTT to be capable of doing, so much that I, as a user or as a developer, like things that I've dreamed that Foundry would be able to do. And I'm so excited about adding all of them, you know, multiple levels for going upstairs, downstairs inside a scene, transition points from one scene to another, triggered effects where like you step into a certain area and it triggers a trap or spawns a combat encounter or does anything that you could imagine from a programmatic perspective. Our improvements that we're doing to journals in V10, I'm super excited about. You know, improvements for adventure importing and exporting, things like that, super excited. Like, we've accomplished so much, but it just feels like there's still an amazing amount of stuff we could do. I mean, you just look at our GitLab backlog, we have 909 open issues of like things that would be good to do in Foundry VTT. And we've done almost 5,000 issues. Like, it's like incredible, like the amount of work that's been done, but like there's just so much still that can be done. And so, you know, I'm really grateful to be able to continue working on this and to have it continue to be successful and to keep growing the software to be more powerful and more capable. All right, let's see. One or two more questions, and then I've got to go collapse. Holdertron asks, you said earlier that you spend a good amount of time on refactorings. What are the biggest opportunities you see in that realm? Well, I think this document refactor is probably one of the biggest, and I was really glad we were able to do it. I think the next one that we're going to turn our attention to is unlinked synthetic tokens, which continue to be a bit of an ugly area of the API. We've got some ideas for how to refactor that hopefully will solve the problem once and for all. So currently, the token in the scene contains actor data that overrides a synthetic actor, and we provide APIs that sort of mock functionality of that as a true actor, but it's not, and it's a mess. It's hard to have it work properly for all use cases. It doesn't work properly for all use cases, and it's not the best for performance either. So I think that's one of the key things where I think we have an idea about how to sort of kill that dead by really doing it a better way, once and for all, that will involve that override data being stored as sort of a primary data table that with related references. And anyways, I don't want to get into it, but I think that's one that continues to be a sore point that is due. I think another one is some of the canvas layering stuff. Currently there's some hard-coded requirements that objects on the canvas be documents or represent documents, and that canvas layers only have to do with placeable objects, which only have to do with documents. And I think we want better APIs around the canvas layers that can make it easier for devs to create a bespoke canvas layer for whatever they want to draw there, whatever that happens to be. This has come up, for example, with cards, with devs who want to make let's make it easy to play cards onto the canvas. It's possible to do it. It's not an unsolvable problem. It's not it can't be done. It's just the API that we offer doesn't make it easy to do that, and it should. I think it should make it easy to do that. And so, that's another area where I think a fairly thoughtful refactor of placeable objects and layers and canvas layers, I think that's something that would really be good. Question from Florian about what was the first closed GitLab issue. That's a good question. Now, when I was first starting work on this, I didn't track issues in GitLab, so there was several months of Foundry work that happened before I started tracking stuff in GitLab. But it looks like disable token rotation as a token configuration option was issue 1. So when I go into my token config and I can say, lock rotation so that the token can't rotate, that was issue number 1 for no real reason. Question from Maravedis of, do I think that our business model, which you love, is sustainable long term? Is there other ways to support us rather than just buying Foundry VTT? Great question, thank you. It's sustainable medium term. It continues to do really great. And I think our license sales, as we continue to grow the community, it's a really strong performer. We're doing fine from a business perspective just on license sales for now. In the long term, we will need to diversify a little bit and think about some other things. There's some related business development opportunities that we have that will allow us to continue operating Foundry as a business and hopefully doing things that people will be really excited about, but giving ways to support us. If you are looking for other ways to contribute to help sustain the work that we're doing and to help support us, there's 2 things I can say. One is that we have a Patreon program that actually gives you some nice side perks, but foundryvtt.com/ or patreon.com/foundryvtt. If you support us on Patreon, that money goes directly to supporting the team and to helping us do what we do. Subscriptions on Twitch, that's always nice, although we don't get as much, per sub on Twitch as we do from your Patreon support. So your $5 goes farther on Patreon than it does on Twitch. And then also, now that we have the DriveThruRPG integration, we will periodically have content available for sale, first-party content like The Demon Queen Awakens. it's a really great adventure for 5th edition, and if you buy that, we get most of that money. So, that's the type of thing we may... it's not going to be our main focus, so I don't want anyone to think that's the case or panic, but we will probably occasionally publish sort of first-party adventure content made specifically for Foundry VTT, because it's something that is really fun to do, and it can help support our work. Huge thanks to me and to the team from Ed Heldilo. Thank you very much. Really appreciate it, Ed. All right, I think I'm gonna wrap this up. It's been great hanging out with all of you for so long, and having you provide, share your thoughts and engage with me to talk about the next, what's coming next for Foundry. This has been really, really cool, and I'm glad I was able to get back into doing a Twitch stream once again. And I think we should check out and see, who else is streaming right now, and maybe if there's anyone using Foundry, maybe we can go sort of show them a little bit of love as we wrap the stream. I'm going to do a quick hunt. Maybe you guys in chat can help me hunt, see if there's a target of someone streaming, maybe under tabletop RPGs, maybe under the D&D category, perhaps. Let's check and see if we've got anyone who's streaming using Foundry. We can go ambush them and share a little bit of the Foundry love with their channel. Let's see what we got. Here's someone running Lost Minds of Phandelver, Session 11. Oh man, they would probably lose it if we invade their channel. I think that looks like a good target. Let's see if anyone else... Let's see if you all have found anyone you want to propose. Yeah, let's do this. We'll raid Charlie Says 92, and we'll just show them the Foundry love and see how their session's going. And but thank you all so much for sticking with me, and this has been great. I look forward to doing these more throughout the V10 cycle, and let's talk on Discord as you're beginning to explore the prototype. We'll have that available for you hopefully by the end of the day, so stay tuned. All right, don't go anywhere. We're gonna do a little raid and share the Foundry love a bit, and hope you'll join me for that. But again, I'll see you all next time, and thanks so much for joining. Cheers, happy gaming, farewell.